Hi, folks. Today we've got something a little bit special. I am honoured to be joined by Kyle Rowan of Wyrd Games. Kyle, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, this is amazing to be here. Thanks for having me.
So today, I want to kind of chat about yourself, about Wyrd Games, about the different products that you produce, and maybe hear some little secrets as well. But we'll start with yourself, Kyle. So, how long have you been at Wyrd? What do you do there? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Yeah. So, hi everyone. I'm Kyle. I'm the design lead here at Wyrd Games. I've been here for just about 5 years now. I started off as a fledgling junior and worked my way up here. Started off working on the Chronicles magazines, and the first board game that I put out was actually the Darkness Comes Rattling expansion, which is free, um, and worked on pretty much everything that we've got under our umbrella since then. So, um, most recently, as you can see behind you, Vagrant Song and Bayou Bash are the two big ones that I contributed to. So.
Fantastic. So before you joined Wyrd, did you have any kind of? I think I remember sort of hearing on a podcast you have a bit of a video game background. Had you kind
Right.
of were you kind of new to the board game industry when you joined Wyrd?
Yeah, so my education is in video game design. I went to Full Sail, graduated there, and then I had a brief stint in kind of the indie development scene. We were working on kind of a Terraria-like game
Right.
at the
Yeah.
time. So unfortunately, the story kind of went when this the way a lot of indie stories go is low funding and stuff like that.
Of
But
course.
kind of switched gears, went into tabletop, and have been learning a ton since then. But it wasn't the default direction I saw myself going. But I'm glad I'm here.
We're glad you're here as well because we're enjoying the stuff that you're putting out there. So I guess let's do a little bit about you before we start. Outside of all the work that you're doing for Wyrd, what kind of do you enjoy? Kind of sort of tabletop games yourself, or are you just kind of
Oh
more
yeah.
of a video gamer?
Well, I mean, I try to dabble in everything. So as far as video games go, I'd say my top three video games are Kentucky Route Zero, which is a point and click adventure game.
Yeah.
If you're not familiar, you might want to check it out. It was a huge inspiration for me for Vagrant Song. Shadow of the Colossus, one of my all-time favorites, and
Yeah.
Fez.
Ooh.
So
Yeah.
really, really kind of very different types of
I was
games,
I
but
was going to say different, but definitely almost you can see the indie in there as well.
right. Yeah, I like the strange stuff. Anything that developers can find kind of a unique space and develop in usually catches my eye. And then as far as tabletop, I don't know if you could see, but my shelf is behind me here, and I've got a little bit of everything. I love big, complicated games and really light, simple games. Most recently, I'm playing a lot of Air, Land, and Sea, which is a really tight, competitive two-player card game. Um, and I really like the withdraw mechanic in that. But then I also play the giant stuff like Kingdom Death Monster. You might be able to see some minis that I still
Yeah.
have to paint back here. I'm a huge fan of the giant campaign games and the dark stuff as well. So
I guess it's almost part of the job description to have a bit of a breadth of what's going on in the gaming world as well, isn't it? So it's nice to enjoy them, but then you can always write it off as research as well, I suppose.
right, it's as much an entertainment experience as it is an educational one to see what other
Yeah.
designers are doing. So
Oh, I can imagine. So I guess obviously this is the first time I ever spoke to anybody from Wyrd Games, even though I've personally got a bit of a kind of a long gaming history with Wyrd. Just for you, Kyle, the first sort of game I ever really sort of started playing was Malefic. I
oh,
started painting miniatures kind of just as a bit of a hobby or something to do, but the first game I ever really sort of started playing was Malefic way back when first edition first launched. So I've got a bit of a history with Wyrd,
yeah,
but I've
more of
never
a
actually
history than I do. If you played it since first, yeah.
yeah, but I've never spoken to anybody from Wyrd yet. So do you want to kind of for the viewers, do you want to give us a little bit of history about Wyrd? How long have you been around? Kind of what's the background a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've started at 2005, started by Nathan and Eric, and they started by just making miniatures. They were
Yeah.
painting hobbyists. They just really liked going at the time. Forums were the big thing on the internet, and
Yeah.
painting competitions and that sort of thing. And they got into gaming not through actual games yet, but just by developing miniatures. And then at a certain point, they, I guess, got together and said, you know what, maybe we should put a game behind this. And the story I always hear Nathan tell is that they were joking around with someone at a convention talking about a game, and on the fly they just said, and this has a deck of cards instead, and then they had to figure it out from there. It turned out it was a genius decision right on the top of your head, because I mean that's kind of really the foundation of a lot of our games, is the 54 deck of cards, and
Yeah.
trying to, that different style of randomness, the controlled randomness, is kind of what gives so much different flavor to our games versus so many others out there.
It's funny because I think it's sometimes something that people maybe don't always even consider. There's so many games just have dice, and we kind of accept that, miniatures games, they come with dice, but the weird games, kind of that almost having that deck of cards, it puts a real spin on it. It's not like, a deck of cards has a memory. It knows what's gone before,
Exactly.
and it knows what's coming next, kind of thing. It's not that sort of 1 in 6 chance every time. I think it just puts a fantastic spin on a game.
Yeah, you're not going to roll that 13 twice. You might draw 13 twice,
Yeah.
but the chances of that are pretty low. So
Yeah, and I guess so whereabouts in the US are you based?
we're right outside Atlanta, in Marietta, not too far away from Atlanta.
And is that where you're from originally, or have you moved to be
No,
there?
I've moved all over the place. So I'm originally a Pennsylvania boy. Then I went to Arizona for about 7.5 years. Then I had a brief stint in Austin, Texas, and I've landed here in Georgia. So a little bit of
Yeah.
everywhere.
Not like us Brits. We tend to stay at home. We don't move around quite so much. Even though we've got a small country, we don't venture much more than about 20 miles from home generally. So yeah, it's I'm always quite impressed when I hear about folks over in the US moving around. I guess the next step is, I suppose, if we want to have a little chat about some of the products that we produce. So obviously Malifaux is the game I think most people will be aware of. If they're not aware of Wyrd necessarily, Malifaux is kind of the big game. But there's a number of other kind of games that sort of feed into Malifaux, if you like, or have grown out of Malifaux. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So for those who aren't familiar with Malifaux, it's a skirmish game. You're going to have about 6 to 10 characters on each side on average, and it's not necessarily about killing your opponent. It's about the objectives in the game and that sort of thing. So you could end up not even killing any enemies in the game and end up winning. It takes place in the early 1900s. We're currently in 1908 on our timeline. It's a really heavily story-driven and character-driven game, because all the characters in the game have changed over the years and grown. And most recently, there's been some major impacts with the title system, which we might get into later.
Yeah.
But yeah, it as far as theming goes, we kind of dabble into a lot of things. It's kind of Wild West meets steampunk meets dark horror. We try to reach out into as many things that make sense in our world, and as the further we reach out, it turns out it's like the stronger the hold is on everything.
Yeah.
So we've got 8 factions in the game. Lots of different things to kind of dive into, as far as like, if you like creepy monsters, they're there. If you like giant constructs, they're there. It's a little bit of everything for everybody in it.
Malifaux is sometimes kind of known as a bit of a competitive game. There's a tournament scene, and people love playing the game competitively. But as you said, it's narrative driven, it's story driven, it's character driven, and I think the way that you sort of yourself as a lead designer and the rest of the team managed to sort of hook the game on the story, but still make it very kind of, I don't know if balanced is the right word, but kind of like, nobody ever feels kind of out of the game, if you like. I think it's a fantastic system. Do you want to kind of I have no idea how you do it. Do you want to kind of talk about that aspect?
Sure. So as far as like what I do on Malifaux,
Yeah.
I'm basically the storied character guy.
Mm.
I'm the one making sure that the story and theme is moving forward, and we're having really interesting twists and turns, and that the um, it translates on the table. You know, the
Yeah.
thing that happens to a certain character is going to translate in how that character plays.
Yeah.
Um, Thankfully, I'm not also the guy who's working on the mechanics of the game. That's my partner in crime, Matt, here in the on the Weird team, and he's just a mastermind when it comes to making these complex mechanics work with one another, and
Yeah.
all these keywords kind of synergize. So thankfully, I've got him on my side to make all these crazy concepts work. So
Work it does as well. I mean, it definitely kind of, as I said before, that the fact that you can have such a narrative-driven sort of game that is still very competitive as well from that expert. Because my experience in the past is you had to kind of make a choice, really. It's either it's something you want to kind of play quite narratively, but let's not worry too much about the balance, or if it's going to be competitive and we're going to play in tournaments, almost the storyline goes out the window a little bit. And again, I think this is one of the few games that manages to kind of to do that really well. And I guess outside of Malifaux as well, we've also got Through the Breach, which is an RPG, and we've also got the other side as well, which is kind of, rather than being a skirmish game, it's a more of an army scale game. Do you want to talk about
sure.
those?
Yeah. So Through the Breach, like you said, is an RPG in the same world as Malifaux. We've got tons of content in it at this point. Most recently, we just released an expansion book called From Nightmares, where you can play as the monsters or Neverborn in the game. And there's a lot of crazy customization that you can do in that. But like Malifaux, it uses a deck of cards instead of rolling dice to figure out actions and abilities and things like that. The one thing that separates it from Malifaux, I mean, there's multiple things that separate it. It is a unique
Yeah,
game. But one major thing is that in Malifaux, each player has their own deck. And Through the Breach, there's a communal deck, and everyone has their own unique set of cards.
yeah,
So that ends up helping create kind of personal choices, but also this communal pool of cards that everyone can kind of see the odds of something may or may not happen based on how cards are
excellent,
drawn and things like that.
excellent.
So.
Wow.
But we've got a lot of stuff in store for Through the Breach. It's an endless supply of content. What's great about Through the Breach is that it allows us to kind of dip into the lore a little bit deeper. So for
Yeah,
players who, I don't know, might not get everything that they want out of the Malifaux books, they can kind of deep dive into some of the Through the Breach content and
yeah,
figure out like the backgrounds of Titania and that
yeah.
sort of thing, those characters. One thing I kind of forgot to mention about Through
Mm,
the Breach that is kind of like the initial hook when you first start playing is
yeah,
the tarot reading.
yeah.
And each expansion has their own kind of special tarot reading, but that's essentially how you create your character in it. You're going
Wow.
to be drawing cards and kind of figuring out who your character is on the fly. And unlike large year-long campaign games, Through the Breach has each character has a definite beginning and end to their story. There's a whole destiny system in the game where Fate Masters kind of inject sort of these lines of fate and destiny into the game, and trigger that based on character plot lines and that sort of thing. So
I like
um,
that.
yeah,
Yeah,
so I really like games, RPGs that have an ending. Blades in the Dark is one of my favorite RPGs, and
yeah.
there's a sense of finality in certain RPGs that I really enjoy because I don't want to play the same character over and over again for years on end. I want to, as a designer, I want to keep making new things, So
Well,
Through the
there
Breach
is.
is one of those.
Yeah, there isn't a sort of like a sort of a lot of RPGs about escapism and about kind of sort of creating this character and living out a different life. If you like, if you just had to live the same life forever in an RPG character, I guess that's not, the escapism starts to wear off. So
Right.
for me personally, I can see that kind of having a start, middle, and an end to a story arc type thing. I quite like that.
The other side, So Malifaux takes place in this alternate universe. We found a breach, or created a breach, and we found this alternate world. Um, and the other side is named that way because it's all happening on Earth. So it's the other side of the breach, where a lot of the magic and darkness from Malifaux is starting to seep through. And it kind of all started with the Governor General of Malifaux and trying to ascend into tyranthood and failing spectacularly and turning into the Burning Man, which is basically a man on fire in the sky, twisting and warping people. But the other side itself is a larger scale game. Malifaux takes place on a 3x3 space, and the other side can take place on either a 4x4 or a 4x6, based on how big you want to go. You can go with like a one commander game in a smaller scale, or a two commander game. And commanders are kind of how you uh, how many points you have essentially to build
Yeah.
your crew there. But it like Malifaux, it does use a deck of cards, but it's a lot more streamlined. It's a lot easier to see what's going on in the game and understand it on a visual perspective, because
Yeah.
we have these fire team bases, and to track damage, all you do is remove models from it. So you can see how well certain areas of combat are going just by a quick glance of the table. So while it's at a bigger scale, it's actually a little bit easier to kind of dive in and play, which
Yeah.
is also why we went with a pre-assembled route on the other side. We wanted to get players to get right into the game right away, whereas Malifaux is largely unassembled stuff. So
Yeah, it's the other side. It's always been something that's kind of really fascinated me. I first picked up stuff just to purely kind of to expand on the Malifaux world and stuff. But actually, the more I read into it, the more it really interested me. So I'm in the middle of painting up my King's Empire at the moment. So I'm looking forward.
excellent.
I've promised myself I won't buy any more till I've painted it, but I am almost finished. So I'm looking at things like the King's Hand and some extra nice bits to flesh it out a little bit. And I guess now's a good time as well to talk about some of the sort of the products and things, because you've got a new 2-player starter set coming out for the other side as well, haven't you?
Right. So we actually just did a pre-release of it at Origins and Gen Con, and it flew off our shelves. We couldn't hold on to it, which is super exciting. But it has two syndicates in it, which are smaller teams essentially that get
Yeah,
you have the option of building out another allegiance. Um, so in the other side, there's Malifaux allegiances and Earthside allegiances. And in this starter set, you have one that's Malifaux and one that's Earthside. So we're bringing two characters from the Malifaux universe into Earth, essentially, and so we have Karai and Sonia, and the Court of Two and the Guild, who are facing off.
yeah,
It's a great way to start playing the game. It comes with a quick breakdown of how kind of turn structures and actions work. And the full rule book is free online too. So as soon as you want to deep dive into everything, you can just start
yeah.
playing immediately. But one thing that we did with this starter that we're sort of introducing is that we're also making a lot of these models compatible with Malifaux itself. So this Karai and this Sonia and all the characters within can also be played in our skirmish game as well.
As far as kind of 2-player starter sets go, is that something that I know in the past there's been a 2-player starter set for Malifaux. Is there anything in the pipeline, or have you got any kind of ideas to do that for Malifaux in the future, do you think?
So Malifaux is kind of a unique beast.
Mm.
It's kind of tough to do a two-player starter the right way. So because the reason being is that the game is so big at this point. There are so many
Yeah,
characters, so many factions. There's 54 masters to choose from across all 8 factions. So and each master has a completely new way of playing the game. It's not like this guy's attacky shooty and this guy's schemy. It's
yeah,
how they're doing that is vastly different from the next. Um, so the direction that we're taking with our starter sets in Malifaux is making them one-player starter sets for each faction, and that allows players to pick and choose their play styles and their themes,
yeah,
um, and without like being forced into a 2-player set that they might not actually want to play as. So you can pick up the Bayou starter and you can pick up the Outcast starter right now, and we'll be doing one for every faction eventually. So there's going
Yeah.
to be a lot of options.
I guess we're talking about masters and about the different way they play and things. And there's a new expansion coming for Malifaux in the very near future as well, isn't there? Which will change things up a little bit more. We touched on it before about titles. Do you want to expand on that?
Sure. So Malifaux Burns is the latest expansion, and it's coming out later this month, near the tail end of October.
Yeah.
And basically, it's taking Malifaux and spinning it on its head completely. The meta is going to be completely shaken up by this, which is appropriate because the main bad guy is the Burning Man and he's all about chaos. So, but essentially, what we're doing with the game is we're giving every master in the game two ways to play. We're introducing a title version of the master. And the way that it works is that when you're building a crew, you can either choose base Karis, the Karis that everyone might already be familiar with, or this new Karis. And the neat part about it is that it's actually a secret to your opponent which version you're going to be playing. So they have to kind of look at the strategies and schemes of the game and kind of do some deciphering on their own and some guesswork to figure out which version of a master you might be playing, which is going to really help shake things up from a crew building standpoint. And it's also going to be bringing up some masters that might not actually see as much play right now because that version of a master, for example, previously might have been a little bit easier to counter, but now with two versions of them, you don't know which version to counter, so it ends up helping some of those characters as well. So I'm really excited to see kind of how things shake out. But in addition to that, we've got a lot of each keyword also has their own characters coming out to help expand pools a little bit too.
I think it's a really smart move because it's a game that does have a lot of characters in there already. If somebody's kind of jumping in at this point, it could potentially be a little bit daunting. Well, where do I start? And I always kind of say to people, start with the models that you think look the coolest, kind of thing, because there's such a really wide range of stuff that there's something for everyone. I'm looking forward to seeing what it does.
Yeah, we're really excited too. And as far as like new players, it might seem a little bit more daunting, but you just kind of have to refocus how you think about it. Previously, you would look at like an entire faction, for example, and figure out, okay, I need to have maybe 3 masters and kind of juggle around 3 crews based on the strategies and schemes put out in front of me. But now you can kind of focus in on a single master that you really like and customize that crew based on the situation. So it actually makes it a little bit easier. It's a different way of thinking about the game a little bit. So that's going to take some readjusting and some kind of consideration as we move forward with it. But pretty excited.
I look forward to seeing it hit the table. I guess the next step as well is we briefly spoke about the few sort of games behind me and things. So we've got a couple of games that's just coming out, which are one in Bayou Bash, which is this one. Oh, if I can get my thumb in the right place, this one here is kind of closely linked to Malifaux, but is separate from Malifaux as a board game. And then we've got Vagrant Song as well, which I assume and I think isn't set in the Malifaux universe. Is that correct?
Right, completely different world.
Yes.
And doing that allowed us to explore all sorts of new concepts. But I could see, like, if you're not familiar with Vagrant Song, how it could be. One's Malifaux's 1900s. This is blurry. It's a little 1920s, 1930s.
Yeah.
So not too far off time-wise, but completely different worlds.
Yeah. So I get Bayou Bash is a kind of a 2 to 4 player game. It's a kind of a racing game. I guess with the focus on kind of fun, really, and a little bit more quirky. Do you want to tell us about that?
Sure. Yeah. So it, like you said, it's a 2 to 4 player racing game. It's not about who crosses the finish line first. It's about who gains the most fans. And the way you gain fans is essentially by beating each other up on the track. Each racer has their own abilities, but you're trying to ram into your opponents. And when you do that, you gain fans. You're going to be placing fans on the track as well, so your victory points are also at risk at being destroyed. So you're going to be tossing barrels at one another, rolling dice. There's a drafting system, and that's how you kind of gain the dice. And there's a catch-up mechanic in the game where the player in last is going to be drafting first. So it's always going to be this clumped up race together. Lots of modular racetracks, but if you like chaos, because there is a serious element of chaos, we couldn't make a game about gremlins in the bayou without implementing chaos. But you also like kind of lighthearted games. It might be up your alley because it's not a complex game to put on the table. It takes about a half an hour, 45 minutes to play, so enough time to build a new racetrack and race again. So
yeah, I've been playing it, and it's kind of first of all, components are fantastic. I love the little wooden meeples, or what did I call them the other day? Manimals.
Yeah,
the little wooden animal meeples. I think the quality of the components is fantastic. It's really nice to see that. And then Vagrant Song, which we'll kind of chat about now as well. I was absolutely blown away when I saw the quality of the components and even from the box quality itself as well. It's one of those things where I've worked in product development for about sort of 15 years of my working life, so I know kind of sometimes you design a product from the price first and you work backwards and you try and make things hit a shelf price. In this instance, it looks like you just kind of you wanted to make a really beautiful game to kind of to fit a really, really nice concept. Do you want to talk about Vagrant Song?
All day.
Yeah.
Good luck getting me to stay quiet about this one. So yeah, Vagrant Song is my baby. I pitched it a few years ago, and I still can't believe it exists because it's such a strange concept. You're vagrants on a ghost train, battling your way in a boss battler. But yeah, components were kind of always in the main mindset. If not like the specifics, but more about like the general rule of what we wanted to do. We wanted to make a big game with a small price tag. We wanted to make something that you can get on the table, you can have a 30 to 40 hour campaign with, but it doesn't take 40 minutes to set up. And you don't have to build anything going into the game or anything like that. So accessibility and getting people to actually play the game was a major focus for us throughout design.
For me, sort of, I play a lot of board games with my wife. My wife she's not a sort of huge board gamer in the same kind of sort of way that I am. And she's not interested in those games. They're kind of like when we say, shall we play a game? And then an hour later, we're still setting it up. We're not actually playing the game. But this is one that we're getting to the table on a regular basis. So yeah, I can vouch for what you're saying there. It's definitely the case. So where did the concept come from? Because it is quite unique.
So a lot of things. I brought up Kentucky Route Zero. I think I was playing that game at the time. Takes place in a similar time period, and it has a kind of ghostly vibe to it. But I've always been a big Jack Kerouac fan. My brother introduced On the Road to me when I was 16, and this one's a little bit more Dharma bums than On the Road. But and then I'm also a huge horror nut, so I pulled inspiration from all sorts of things. There's a folk artist that I really like, named Amigo the Devil. He sings kind of dark stuff, but it's got kind of a whimsy tone to it. So yeah, there's inspiration from all sorts of things. So it was just kind of a collection of like everything I'm kind of obsessed about into one game.
It come together really well because I mean, certainly from one of the things that I thought was quite unique. So for those that don't know, basically, what you're on a like you say, kind of hobos on a ghost train type thing, and you're essentially trying to instill humanity back into these ghosts to basically kind of rest their souls, if you like. So it's not a game where you're basically trying to kill things. It's not a kind of. It's almost. It's like a feel-good story type thing, almost in that respect. And you're trying to kind of lay these kind of ghosts to rest a little bit. But then the art style that you've chosen to go with as well is that I think it's called rubber hose. But I
Right.
kind of googled this to see what rubber hose was and where it come from. And if anyone's familiar with kind of old sort of, I guess, like 1930s, 1940s cartoons with those really sort of rubbery arm type sort of exaggerated sort of movements, and if anyone's familiar with Cuphead, the video game, it's that kind of style. And I think it fits the tone perfectly. Is there a reason why you went down that particular art style?
So we had actually tried 2 or 3 other art styles prior to this. We had done something similar to Hellboy with like those dark shadows and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
We tried some woodwork, kind of like wood carved sort of things. But none of them really hit. It didn't really kind of show what the theme was without us
Yeah.
having to explain it. So we looked at art of that time period,
Yeah.
Betty Boop and
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. That's what I should have started with. Yeah.
but yeah, essentially once we kind of said, why don't we try this style, and our artist Snippy just did a tremendous job right off the bat. We're like, this is it.
Yeah.
There's all the other stuff was great, but this was Vagrant Song. Suddenly we couldn't unsee it anymore.
Yeah.
So we just went for it, and she did a phenomenal job on the stuff. I still am amazed by how some of the characters and Haints turned out in it. So
It's a match made in heaven. It absolutely it fits the tone of the game perfectly. I was talking about quality. Obviously, in the game, the actual characters themselves and the Haints or the ghosts are basically kind of sort of acrylic, like printed acrylic, standy type things. So I think it's that perfect mix between miniatures and kind of card standy or token type things. I think it's a fantastic choice. The fact that everything fits back in the box perfectly as well, especially when a game that you're going to spend 30 hours with, to be able to pack it away and kind of unpack it really quickly is a fantastic touch. And as I said, just the quality of the components, basically. The board looks beautiful, even the little kind of gingham bindle bag as well that's in there. Everything's just, there's a real sense of thought that's gone into it, and I play a lot of games and a lot of board games, a lot of miniatures games. I can honestly say that's not the case of every game I've ever seen. So
sure.
it's kind of, it's appreciated from a player's point of view anyway.
Well, thank you. I think the secret hero in that box is that insert. I buy so many games, and I like to stand them up vertically.
Yeah.
So the second I do, everything falls to the bottom.
Everything falls. Yeah.
Yeah. So that insert luckily keeps most of it in place.
It definitely does, and I promise to put some nice shots in it when we're talking about it here as well, because it definitely does. So Vagrant Song is coming. I guess it's coming pretty soon to retail, isn't it?
Right. So we're only saying fall 2021 because the industry right now is experiencing all sorts of shipping nightmares. So we're aiming for mid to late November for it to hit local game stores.
Yeah.
That's when we're crossing our fingers. It's all looking like that's going to be the case. So,
and I guess what we could say as well is that if anyone's interested in Vagrant Song at the moment, I think on Tabletop Simulator there's a couple of the initial scenarios as well. If it's something that you want to have a little look at and understand how the game plays, you can certainly go and check those out as well.
Yeah. So the first 2 scenarios are on Tabletop Simulator. They're both kind of tutorials, but really the game. You learn how the game is played once you get like 2 rounds in. It's pretty straightforward, but it's about the layered complexities of the game as it goes on. We like to add rules and complications.
We were just chatting briefly before we started kind of recording as well, and I'm about 5. I think it's either 5 or 6 of the scenarios into this sort of campaign, and I'll do a more in-depth review of it later to kind of explain more, but very briefly, it's a game that it is a campaign. There's this kind of that in-between scenario part with the camp where you're buying bits of upgrades and things. There's stuff that happens that will impact upon following games. It's got a kind of a legacy aspect without that kind of destroying bits that you can never go back and play again. So for anybody that loves campaign games, if you love that boss battler as well, it'll be right up your street. I mean, what kind of games would you sort of liken it to try and give a flavor of?
So at its core, it's definitely a boss battler.
Yeah.
So if you're familiar with Kingdom Death, for example, it's going to feel relatively similar to that.
Mm.
But it's also pulling inspirations from dungeon crawlers and from games like Mansions of Madness, because you're not just fighting the bad guys, you're also
Yeah.
investigating the train
Yeah.
and kind of learning their story and that sort of thing. So if you like large scale games, but getting those to the table is actually fairly difficult, this might be up your alley, because it takes literally 5 minutes to set up, which
Yeah.
is something I really pride in.
It works brilliantly. So yeah, well done on that one. I guess we're going to obviously try and push you now for a little bit of sneak peek. So is there anything sort of, what's the future plans for what are you working on that you can tell us about? What's the future plans for Wyrd? Is there anything you can kind of tell us?
Yeah. So Bayou Bash, we're working on an expansion right now.
Excellent.
It'll have 4 more characters in it. So we've announced 2 so far, the Toad Twins and the Whiskey Gaiman. I believe that's the one
Yeah.
we announced. And if we didn't, well, Whiskey
We
Gaiman's
just
out.
did.
But yeah, 4 new characters. There's going to be a lot more in store for that. There's going to be more ways to play, more chaos to ensue, and that sort of thing. We also just recently announced for the other side 2 new allegiances that are coming out. And we've got some more guild and Court of Two content as well with Hexbos and Yaksha. But as far as the 2 new allegiances, we're looking at 2022 for those. We've got the Kamon, which are Oni, essentially, coming from another world called the Beyond, that have been summoned. And if you're a fan of Through the Breach, you might have already been familiar with them with our Obsidian Gate campaign. That's kind of how we introduce them. A lot of the times with our games, we like to introduce them in different worlds and then kind of explode in one of the games with that content. And that's what we're doing here. So it's got the Kamon, and it's also got the 3 kingdoms in it as well. So lots of stuff coming for the other side. Then Malifaux, I have to stay a little tight-lipped on, because we're still focusing on Malifaux Burns and all the titles and stuff.
Yeah, I
But
guess that's not even sold the table yet, really, for into people's
right,
hands too much. So
yeah.
Yeah.
In my head, we've been done for like 6 months now, but yeah, it hasn't hit tables yet. But in the background, we are working on a new gaining grounds and that sort of thing. So I don't have a release date for that or anything like that. But gaining grounds is our way of adding new life to the game. So it gives you new strategies and schemes and that sort of thing. So we're actively working on that right now.
And for those that don't know, it's kind of like an annual release, almost like I don't want to say the kind of like the tournament pack type thing, but it's almost just it's an annual release of new scenarios, that type of stuff, to kind of just keep the game fresh.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And we do it seasonally, just in case we want to, spice things up a little sooner, or but it usually, so far, it has been yearly. So
Yeah. I guess, is there where's the best place? I mean, what I will say before we saw where's the best place to kind of find out more, I want to kind of point people towards the fantastic apps that you guys do as well, because
Yes.
I think that they are by far the best sort of game related apps that I've ever come across when it comes to tabletop games. There is obviously the one for Malefic, which is the M3E app, which is free to download. There's also the new one as well, isn't there, for the other side as well?
Right. So we have the Malifaux Crew Builder, and that is available on iOS, Android, and on your computer. You can go to malifauxcrewbuilder.com. Both of these apps are developed by a wizard named DZ. I can't believe how he does this stuff, but we really appreciate what he's been able to do, because, like you said, it's so fast, so streamlined in order to get a crew built, and allows players to kind of proxy in things and kind of brainstorm on how to build crews without having to, spend money on the models yet. They can
Yeah.
kind of dance around that stuff really, really quickly. But yeah, we just recently came out with the other side's company builder, and that's also available on all of those platforms as well. And it allows you to build your company right on your phone or on your PC. So
Yeah.
we're really happy with how those turned out. Cards for the upcoming content will be coming out soon. We're probably looking at November, December to get all the updated stuff. We like to give our local game stores kind of time to
Of course,
sell our
yeah.
products first, but not the wait isn't long to play titles via the app. So
Yeah. I mean, one thing I would say is that they're not just crew builders as well. All of the cards for the, as you say, for the different characters are all on there, so you can have a look through them. Maybe have a look at the stats before you decide where you want to spend your money or something. But then there's also all of the kind of the Breachside broadcast and the the Earthside echoes, which for those not familiar are kind of narrative audio stories, which honestly is just it sets the whole world of Malifaux apart from other games, I think. So even if you just want to kind of dip in and get a flavour of what the world is about, there's so much free content out there to be able to just kind of wrap your ears around and kind of and find out what it is.
Yeah, so like you said, there's Breachside broadcast. It's audiobooks or for our existing content or all of our lore.
Yeah.
We also have Chronicles, which are the kind of the smaller scale stories, but we allow to do some kind of the stranger stuff in those.
Yeah.
Kind of dip into like a Death Marshal story and that sort of thing, rather than focusing on like the big scale like master stories and that sort of thing. And then these apps also allow you to track everything in the game too, all the conditions, all the damage and that sort of stuff. It's all available on your device, so you don't need to have all these tokens and stuff on the table either. It keeps things nice, clean and tidy.
Yeah, they work fantastic. I'm super impressed with them. Kyle, I won't keep you too much longer. Thank you so much for your time. I hope we get to chat again in the future as well as new things come down the pipeline.
Absolutely.
Is there anything you want to kind of add to it before we call a close?
Well, I mean, first, thanks for having me. This has been amazing.
You're welcome.
Anything I want to add? No, I think we kind of covered just about everything. One thing to keep an eye out for if you want to get into more of our news and that sort of thing, every Wednesday we usually do a fairly large announcement about what's coming. So check our website and we'll do Waldo's Weeklies. Waldo's our demonic imp mascot, and he likes to give us some news every so often. So check back there, and we should have some stuff in the future.
Yeah, we should give a shout as well to the new weird streams as well that are happening. They haven't been going too long now. They've just started recently. So if you want to see some awesome painters painting up some weird miniatures, check out the weird streams as well.
Yeah, they're happening Monday through Thursday right now throughout the day. There are from our community members. So please go check it out. It's twitch.tv/playweird, or you can also visit our Facebook page or YouTube. But yeah, they're always painting the new shiny stuff usually.
Yeah.
So if you're not sold on what a model might look like on the box, you get a live shot of it there. So yeah, they're doing great work there too.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Kat. Really appreciate your time, and thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you again next time.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks for watching my video. I hope that you really enjoyed it. And if you did, why not consider clicking on the suggested video below to see more of the work that I've done. If you'd like to support the long-term sustainability of this channel, why not consider checking out my Patreon, where you can pledge and support from as little as $2 a month. And there is lots of different tiers and bonuses, which will give you access to a private Discord server. It will give you free t-shirts, free mugs, a podcast every month, and a number of other things, including getting your name at the end of every video, like these awesome folks who already support me now.